Cancer is often the result of DNA mutations or problems with how cells divide, which then can lead to cells basically forgetting what type of cell they are or how to function properly. But now a team of scientists from the Salk Institute in La Jolla has found a way to prevent this from happening. This could be a cancer breakthrough. Here now to talk more about it is the Chief Science Officer of the Salk Institute, Dr. Martin Hetzer. Doctor, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, good to be with you, also from quite some distance.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, you call this helping cells. I read the whole report here. It's pretty amazing. But you call it helping cells solve their identity crisis. Can you explain that a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, all tissues and organs in our body are made of cells, in fact, of hundreds of different kinds of cells that have different jobs to do. And each cell knows what to do because out of the 20,000 genes that we have in our genome, only a subset of a few thousand genes are turned on in a particular cell. So a liver cell turns on a different set of genes than an immune cell, for instance. And the proteins made from these genes determine what the cell can do and therefore determine its identity. And so when cells divide, which they have to maintain issues, something remarkable happens. Essentially, all genes are turned off, which means they lose the very activity that maintains their identity. So in this study, we at the Salk Institute analyzed how cells actually remember their identity when the genes are turned off.
Wow. Okay. So then at that point, because we all have cancer cells in our body, correct? It's just whether they're going to be active or not. So when the cell divides, you're saying that cell then turns cancerous because it's no longer doing the function it was originally supposed to.
Exactly. So cell division, we have billions of events every day of cells dividing. And this is one of the most critical periods in the development of a cell. And during this process, cells have to copy their entire genome, the DNA, correctly and split it to two different cells. And to reduce complications in the process, we call mitosis, they shut down the expression of genes. And we discovered the pattern that genes use to activate right after cell division. And this happens in a cascade, almost like a row of falling dominoes, where early genes are expressed to tell other genes that come on later what to express and how to get back the identity. And this process of activation allows the cell to wake up from its sort of temporary amnesia, if you wish. And we found molecular bookmarks that cells use to tell which genes to turn on and turn off. And when those bookmarks are not properly located, then a cell forgets its identity and can become cancerous.
So how are you actually achieving this? Is it a therapy? Is it a medicine? I mean, how are you teaching this cell to remember its job?
Yeah, so the mechanism that those cells use is called an epigenetic mechanism, which means that cells don't change the genetic information and content, but they use chemical modifications that they put on the genome that instruct the genes to either turn off and turn on. And those chemical modifications are very amenable to pharmacological interventions. So by identifying aberrant patterns of this bookmarking during cell division, we can use pharmacological intervention to either prevent false bookmarks from being put on the genome or help the cell to put the right bookmarks in the right place at the right time so that a cell doesn't become cancerous and can develop normally.
So unlike current therapy for cancer, that is just so tough on the body where you're basically killing all the cancer cells, you are retraining the cell to do what it was supposed to do, thereby eliminating the cancer.
We basically help the cell to remember in a literal way. It's in a molecular way, exactly. And you're right, like there are billions of cells that divide every day in our body. And a small percentage of those cells make mistakes in that process. And the goal in cancer therapy, and the gold standard would be to identify those very early events, even prevent them from happening. So to help those cells to, in these early stages, to prevent from those changes to become and to really escalate and become fully cancerous. So we try to use this study to identify early events even before, like, you have a tumor or before you have many cancer cells available, to help the cells to remember who they are, if you wish.
Wow, this is extraordinary. I'd like to have you back on because we need to get more into this. Now we know the what. I'd like to know what's next for this study, where you take this research, and what it can mean on a global scale. So let's get you back so we can continue this conversation, Doctor. Thank you so much for your time.
Excellent.
And for everything your team is finding. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Stay well.